After he inherits an old farm, he finds an Apache warrior hanged inside John Mercer's car bounced along the dirt road, sending small clouds of dust into the late afternoon sun. He squinted against the glare, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. The city, with its constant noise and endless concrete, had always been his world. But today he was far from it. His late uncle's farm sprawled across the horizon, abandoned for decades. A letter, simple and official, had informed him of the inheritance. A farm in the middle of nowhere, and a fortune in land and old buildings waiting for him. He slowed as he reached the farm entrance. The iron gate hung crooked, creaking weakly in the wind. Beyond it, the fields stretched like a patchwork quilt of golden grass and wildflowers, broken only by the weathered farmhouse in the distance. Time seemed to move differently here, slower, quieter, almost heavy with memories. John parked the car, stepping onto the gravel with a cautious optimism. He had grown up in the city, surrounded by machines and technology, but there was something oddly exciting about being here alone. The farm smelled of earth and old wood, a scent so unfamiliar it made him feel both nervous and alive. The farmhouse loomed ahead. Its paint had peeled away years ago, leaving gray boards that creaked under the wind. Windows were dusty, some cracked. The door sagged on its hinges, welcoming him with a hollow groan. John pushed it open, stepping inside. Dust motes danced in the sunbeams streaming through the broken windows. The air smelled musty, of old wood and long-forgotten things. He set his bag down and began exploring, running his fingers along walls that had survived decades of storms and neglect. Each room told a story. A broken chair here, a faded photograph there, shadows of lives that had long gone. Then he found the stairs. They were narrow, leading to the attic, where his uncle's old belongings had supposedly been stored. He hesitated for a moment. Something about attics always felt strange, like they held secrets meant to stay hidden. But curiosity pushed him forward. Step by creaking step, he climbed, each floorboard groaning under his weight. The attic was dim, the light struggling through the small windows near the roof. Dust covered everything, old trunks, a rusted bicycle, yellowed papers stacked in piles. John's eyes scanned the room, trying to understand why his uncle had kept so many things here, and then he saw it. At first, he thought it was a mannequin, but as he stepped closer, his stomach turned cold. A figure hung from a thick wooden beam. It was a man, a real man, but not like any he had ever seen. The body was dressed in traditional Apache clothing, feathers, beads, and leather stitched carefully with patterns. The face was calm, almost noble, and though the body was lifeless, there was something unsettling about it. It looked as if the man had simply fallen asleep centuries ago. John stumbled back, his hand flying to his mouth. How could this be? The farm was old, yes, but this was impossible. He scanned the attic. No papers, no notes, nothing explained why an Apache warrior was hanging here. The ropes were thick, coarse, but clean, as if carefully chosen. His logical mind raced, trying to find an explanation. "Uncle, what is this?" he whispered to himself, though of course there was no answer. John's first instinct was to leave, call the authorities, and never speak of it again. But a strange pull kept him rooted. Something about the figure was compelling, almost alive. He noticed symbols etched into the wooden beams and floorboards around the warrior, geometric patterns, spirals, and lines that seemed to form a language of their own. His heart pounded as he crouched to examine them. He was an engineer, trained to analyze, to find order in chaos. The symbols were not random. They followed a pattern, a rhythm. His fingers traced them slowly, memorizing shapes. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a thought struck him. These symbols were a code, a map, a message meant for someone who could understand. And somehow he thought he could. The sun outside sank lower, turning the light in the attic golden. Shadows stretched across the walls, and for a brief moment the figure seemed almost moving. John shook his head. He must be imagining it. The exhaustion of travel, the strangeness of the house, it all played tricks on him. He backed away from the hanging figure, forcing himself to breathe. He needed to think. He pulled out his phone, but there was no signal. Of course there was. The farm was isolated, cut off from the world. That was part of its charm, his uncle had once said in a letter he remembered reading long ago. A place to escape, a place to be alone. But now it felt like a trap. John sat on an old trunk, trying to calm his mind. The symbols, the warrior, the sense that the room itself was alive. It was too much to process at once. But he also knew something important. He had been chosen to find this. Whether by fate, coincidence, or something else entirely, he had to understand it. He began sketching the symbols in a notebook, copying each line and spiral with careful precision. Hours passed, and as he worked, the attic grew darker. He lit a small lantern, the warm glow casting flickering shadows. The warrior's face was still calm, still silent. But John felt it, an energy, a presence, something that reached beyond time. Night fell and the farm grew quiet. The wind whispered through the broken windows, carrying with it the scent of earth and grass. John could hear nothing but his own breathing and the occasional creak of the old house settling. He glanced back at the figure. A thought struck him, strange and sudden. What if this is not death? What if he is waiting for me? The idea seemed absurd. Yet something in the warrior's posture, the symbols around him, the weight of history pressing down in the room, all suggested that John's presence here was not accidental. That this discovery, terrifying as it was, had a purpose. He forced himself to sleep that night in the farmhouse, the warrior hanging silently in the attic above. Dreams came uneasy and strange, filled with shadows of past battles, distant lands, and faces of people he did not know but somehow recognized. When he awoke, sunlight poured through the windows, illuminating the attic in a golden glow. John knew he could not ignore this any longer. The warrior was more than a relic, the symbols were more than carvings, and this farm, his inheritance, was not just land. It was a doorway, a challenge, and perhaps the beginning of something extraordinary. As he prepared to climb the stairs again, notebook in hand, he whispered quietly to the attic, "I don't know who you are, but I will understand." And with that, the adventure began. The morning light streamed through the broken windows, painting the attic in warm gold. John Mercer stood at the foot of the stairs, staring at the Apache warrior. His notebook was open, filled with sketches of the symbols that circled the figure like a protective web. He felt an odd mixture of fear and excitement. There was something about this warrior, something ancient and alive, that his mind struggled to comprehend. He stepped cautiously into the attic. Each creak of the old floorboards echoed like a warning. John examined the symbols again, running his fingers lightly over the etched lines. They were precise, almost mathematical. But he noticed something odd. Some symbols glowed faintly in the sunlight, subtle and almost imperceptible. John froze. The glow pulsed slowly as if responding to his presence. He held his breath. Could this be alive? The thought seemed impossible, yet every fiber of his being told him otherwise. He glanced at the warrior. The body hung perfectly still as if frozen in time, yet a spark in the eyes, barely visible, made his stomach twist. Okay, he whispered to himself. This isn't normal. I need to understand it. He sat cross-legged on the dusty floor and opened his notebook. Using logic, he began connecting symbols, looking for patterns. Hours passed, the attic growing warmer with the rising sun. Then suddenly a soft hum filled the room, a vibration under his feet that was not from the house itself. John's heart raced. The hum grew louder, the symbols glowed brighter, and then to his shock the warrior's eyes opened. They were dark, deep, and focused on him, yet filled with a knowledge that transcended centuries. John stumbled back. You're alive," he stammered. The warrior said nothing at first. Then in a voice low and resonant, almost like the wind through a canyon, he spoke. "I am Ahuli, and you have awakened me." John froze. The voice was real, not imagined. His heart pounded. He looked at Ahuli again. The rope that had bound him seemed to dissolve, fading as if it had never existed. The symbols on the floor pulsed in response. How is this possible?" John asked, his voice barely above a whisper. You've been hanging here for how long?" Ahuli's gaze swept across the attic, lingering on the symbols. "Time is not as it seems here. I have waited for one who could understand the signs." His eyes locked onto John's. "You human have the mind to see what is hidden." John felt a shiver run down his spine. A warrior from centuries past, preserved somehow, waiting for him. But more importantly, the symbols, they weren't just decorations. They were instructions, tools, a map. His logical human mind began to decipher them rapidly. He realized they were a combination of mathematics, ancient Apache language, and something unfamiliar, something advanced beyond his understanding. "The farm," John said slowly. "It's not just a farm, is it?" Ahuli inclined his head. "It is a nexus. A place where the world of humans meets something beyond. My people once guarded it long ago, but we failed and the knowledge was lost. Until now." John's mind raced. "Beyond. You mean aliens? The word tasted strange on his tongue, but it fit the impossible truth he now faced. Ahuli nodded. Not all who walk the stars are as they appear. Many are cold, precise, without understanding. They do not see value in human life. That is why I wait. And why you must act. John swallowed hard. He had always relied on logic, on observation. But now he felt the weight of something far greater. The farm, the warrior, the symbols, they were all connected, and they were warning him. What do I do?" he asked, fear and determination mixing in his voice. Ahuli stepped down from the beam where he had hung, his movements fluid and precise like a dancer. "First, you must learn to read the language of the signs. They are not just symbols, they are instructions for protection, for survival, and soon you will need more than knowledge. You will need courage." John nodded, trying to absorb everything. He began to trace the symbols again, guided by Ahuli's silent presence. The warrior showed him how to align them, how the shapes interacted with light and energy. John realized this was a technology unlike anything on Earth, a fusion of human intuition and knowledge from beyond. Hours turned into days. John's city skills, his ability to think logically and creatively, combined with Ahuli's ancient wisdom, allowed him to unlock secrets hidden for centuries. The attic, once dusty and lifeless, now seemed alive with energy. Light pulsed along the floorboards as patterns aligned, creating shapes that hovered slightly above the surface, glowing faintly. Then one night it happened. A sudden vibration shook the farmhouse, rattling the windows and sending dust into the air. Outside, the wind carried a strange, metallic sound, like distant machinery moving over the plains. John ran to the window, heart hammering. A fleet of small, dark shapes moved across the horizon, rising higher into the sky. "They are here," Ahuli said quietly, watching the movement with sharp, alert eyes. "They have sensed the awakening." John felt a chill. Sensed what, us?" Ahuli's expression was grave. "Your work has sent a signal beyond this world. The guardians of the lost nexus have been disturbed, and now we must prepare." Panic surged, but John forced himself to think. They were outnumbered, outgunned. But humans had something no machine, no alien force could match: creativity, unpredictability, and the ability to adapt. He took a deep breath. "Then we fight smart," John said, more to himself than anyone else. "We find their weakness, we use what we have." Ahuli nodded approvingly. "Your mind is sharp, human. That is why you were chosen. Your kind, you are unpredictable, and that is a strength they cannot calculate." Together, they worked through the night. Ahuli guided John to understand the symbols not just as instructions, but as tools, traps, signals, protective wards. John improvised, combining his knowledge of engineering with the ancient designs. By dawn, the attic glowed with energy, forming a lattice of defense that radiated outward from the farm, invisible to the naked eye but potent against any intruder. When John finally stepped outside, the farm looked calm, serene, as if nothing had happened. The morning sun bathed the plains in gold, but John knew better. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a force had been alerted and it was coming. He turned to Ahuli, who stood silently at the edge of the fields, watching the sky. "How long do we have?" John asked. Ahuli's gaze was steady, unwavering. "Enough time to prepare, not enough to hesitate. The moment of challenge approaches, and we must be ready. The survival of humans depends on it." John's fingers brushed the glowing symbols on his notebook. For the first time, he felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. This was bigger than anything he had ever faced. The farm, the warrior, the symbols, they were not just history. They were the beginning of a fight, a test, and a revelation of human potential. And John Mercer knew one thing with certainty: humanity had a chance because they were clever, brave, and unpredictable. The wind swept across the plains. Somewhere far above, dark shapes moved silently. And the farm, quiet and unassuming, became the front line of a battle John had never imagined, where the mind, courage, and spirit of a human would be the most dangerous weapon of all. The sun sank behind the rolling plains, casting long shadows across the farm. John Mercer stood at the edge of the field, notebook in hand, his eyes scanning the horizon. Ahuli, the Apache warrior, moved silently beside him, every step deliberate, every gaze alert. The peaceful countryside now felt like the edge of a battlefield. Earlier that day, they had detected the first signs of the alien intruders, dark shapes moving too smoothly, too fast, across the distant hills. They were unlike anything John had ever seen. Sleek, metallic, and glinting in the sunlight, the ships, or drones, hovered without sound, observing the farm as though it were a specimen. "They are studying us," Ahuli said, his voice calm but edged with tension. "They do not understand humans yet. They are calculating, watching for weakness." John nodded, his mind racing. He had always trusted logic and patterns, and the symbols in the attic had given him tools to anticipate the aliens' moves. But he realized something unsettling. These creatures did not fight like humans. They did not hesitate, they did not fear, and they adapted quickly. "Then we have to be unpredictable," John said. "We can't let them see our patterns." Ahuli inclined his head approvingly. "Unpredictability is the strength of humans. Our ancestors knew it well. Your mind, young one, can create chaos where they expect order." The farmhouse, once silent and ordinary, had become their command center. John studied the glowing symbols he had traced in his notebook, thinking of ways to extend them beyond the attic. Ahuli's knowledge of ancient traps, combined with John's understanding of engineering and physics, gave them ideas that even the aliens could not calculate. By nightfall, they had placed devices along the farm's perimeter, small energy nodes, triggered by motion, aligned with the patterns of the symbols. They would not physically harm the intruders but would confuse their sensors, forcing the alien drones to miscalculate. John looked up at the sky. The first alien ship appeared, hovering silently above the plains. Its surface shimmered like liquid metal, reflecting the moonlight. John's stomach twisted. Even with preparation, seeing them so close was terrifying. "They are fast," John whispered. "Much faster than anything on Earth." Ahuli's eyes were sharp. "Speed is nothing if you can think ahead. They rely on prediction. Humans, we cannot be predicted." John watched as the drones moved closer, scanning the farm with beams of light that cut through the darkness. He felt the power of fear pressing on him, but he focused on the task at hand. The first node activated, sending a pulse of energy into the field. One of the drones flickered, confused. The others hesitated. "Good," Ahuli murmured. "They can be tricked, but they will learn. We must adapt faster." Hours passed in tense silence. John realized that the aliens were not attacking immediately, they were testing. Each flicker, each pause gave him insight. He adjusted the nodes, shifted the patterns, and created false trails to confuse the intruders. "This is like a game," John said, a nervous smile breaking through. "Except if we lose, it's not just a game." Ahuli's expression remained serious. "And that is why humans are dangerous. We think in ways they cannot anticipate. We improvise. We survive where logic fails." Suddenly, the largest drone descended sharply, hovering just above the farmhouse. It emitted a low hum that vibrated through the wooden floors. John realized with horror that this one was different, intelligent, commanding, possibly controlling the others. "They are coordinating," John said, pointing. "That one, it's like a captain. If we can disrupt it, maybe the rest will falter." Ahuli nodded. "Then we must focus on that one, but direct attack will fail. We need cunning, a human weapon." John's mind raced. He studied the drone's movement, the way it hovered and rotated, the way the light reflected off its surface. Then an idea formed, something completely unexpected. "We don't fight them with strength," he said. "We fight them with chaos. They rely on patterns. If we can create unpredictability, even briefly, we can confuse them enough to gain control." Ahuli's eyes gleamed with understanding. "Yes, that is why you were chosen. Humans do not follow logic alone. We improvise, create, deceive. That is our edge." Working together, they set the plan into motion. John modified the energy nodes to emit random pulses, patterns that seemed erratic to the alien sensors. Ahuli positioned the nodes around the farmhouse strategically, drawing the largest drone closer with subtle shifts in light and motion. The first pulse struck. The drone flickered violently, its movements jerky and erratic. It scanned the farm again, trying to find the source of the disruption. Then another pulse, stronger this time, created a chaotic field around the farmhouse. The drone wobbled in midair, disoriented. John's pulse quickened. "It's working," Ahuli nodded. "Yes, but do not celebrate yet. They will adapt. We must act quickly." Using the confusion, John climbed onto the roof with a small device he had assembled from parts in the attic. He positioned it above the farmhouse, aligning it with the largest drone's flight path. With a steady hand, he activated the device. A beam of energy shot upward, creating a distorted reflection of the farmhouse and the surrounding farm. The drone's sensors flickered wildly. It could not distinguish reality from illusion. The smaller drones below began to hesitate, unsure whether to follow or retreat. "Now," Ahuli said, his voice a whisper, "lead them into the trap." John triggered the final sequence. The energy nodes sent out synchronized pulses, creating multiple false signals. The drones, overwhelmed by unpredictability, veered off course. One collided with a hill, another spun into the sky and vanished beyond the horizon. The largest drone, still above the farmhouse, faltered in its flight. Ahuli stepped forward, moving with lightning speed. He used a combination of martial skill and precise strikes on the drone's outer surface, exploiting the confusion John had created. Sparks flew, and the alien machine shuddered. John watched in awe. This warrior, frozen in time for centuries, was now using human ingenuity and instinct to fight a being far more advanced than anything on Earth. Finally, with a surge of energy from the nodes, the drone lost stability entirely. It tumbled across the sky, finally crashing into a distant field with a thunderous explosion. The remaining drones retreated, slipping back into the horizon. The farm was quiet again, bathed in moonlight. John sank to his knees, heart pounding with adrenaline. He looked at Ahuli, who stood calmly, observing the sky. You were incredible," John said, awe in his voice. "I never thought humans could do this." Ahuli smiled faintly. "It is not just humans, young one, it is the mind, courage, and unpredictability of humans. We are not machines, we do not follow patterns blindly. That is why we survive, why we endure." John nodded slowly, still catching his breath. He realized something profound. Technology and strength alone were not enough. It was human creativity, intuition, and courage that had turned the tide. For the first time, he felt a deep connection to the past, the warrior's people, the farm, the symbols, and the wisdom that had been hidden for centuries. Humanity was not weak, not helpless. They had a strength that no alien machine could calculate. "Tomorrow," Ahuli said quietly, "they may return, or others may come, but you have learned something tonight. You are ready to face what comes." John looked out across the plains. The stars twinkled, peaceful but indifferent. Somewhere far away, alien forces observed, plotting, calculating. But here on this farm, humans had proven something extraordinary. They could survive, they could fight. And they could prevail, because they were clever, adaptable, and brave. As he climbed back into the farmhouse, John felt a sense of purpose he had never known. The farm was no longer just a piece of inherited land. It was a battlefield, a classroom, and a proving ground for what humans could achieve. And in the attic, the warrior Ahuli watched, silent and patient, knowing that the fight was far from over, but also knowing that humanity had a chance. A real chance. The first light of dawn broke over the plains, painting the farmhouse in soft shades of gold and pink. John Mercer stood at the edge of the field, his eyes scanning the horizon. The events of the previous night still echoed in his mind. The disoriented alien drones, the sparks from the largest machine, and Ahuli's unmatched skill in combat. For the first time, John felt the weight of responsibility settle firmly on his shoulders. This farm was no longer just an inheritance, it was a battlefield, and he, along with Ahuli, were the frontline defenders of Earth. Ahuli moved silently beside him, eyes sharp and alert. "They will return," he said quietly, "and next time they will come prepared." "But we have a gift that they cannot predict," John frowned. "A gift?" "The human mind," Ahuli said, his voice calm and steady. "We are not limited by algorithms or rigid patterns. Our strength lies in creativity, improvisation, and the courage to act when all seems lost. That is why we survived before, and that is why we will survive again." John nodded, understanding dawning. It was not the technology nor the weapons that had turned the tide last night. It was human adaptability. The aliens had relied on patterns, calculations, and predictability, and humans had none of those limitations. They returned to the attic, where the symbols still pulsed faintly. John studied them again, tracing lines with his fingers, noting how the shapes interacted with the light. Each pattern seemed to respond to his touch, like a key waiting for the correct combination of thought and action. "I think I understand," John said slowly. "These symbols, they're not just defenses. They're tools we can use to confuse them, mislead them, even control the battlefield." Ahuli nodded approvingly. "Yes, and tonight we will show them what humans can do when they use mind and instinct together." They spent the day preparing. John modified the energy nodes, adding subtle variations in the pulse sequence. He created decoys and illusions that would make the drones believe the farmhouse was moving, or that soldiers were hidden among the fields. Ahuli trained him in the art of strategy, ways to anticipate movement, to exploit hesitation, and to use the environment to their advantage. As night fell, the tension grew. The farm was silent, but the air carried a faint hum, almost imperceptible, as the alien presence approached. John's hands trembled slightly as he activated the first node. A soft pulse of energy spread across the field, invisible to the naked eye but potent against alien sensors. Then the drones appeared. This time there were more of them, sleek metallic shapes moving in perfect coordination. John's heart raced, but he remembered Ahuli's words: creativity, unpredictability, courage. Focus on the patterns, Ahuli said. Make them doubt, make them hesitate. John took a deep breath and activated the decoys. Lights flickered across the fields, mimicking movement. Shadows shifted in impossible directions. The drones paused, confused by the contradictory signals. Now, Ahuli whispered. They triggered the energy nodes in rapid succession. Pulses overlapped and shifted unpredictably, creating chaos for the alien machines. One drone collided with a decoy, mistaking it for an obstacle. Another hovered uncertainly, unsure which path to take. John realized something incredible. Humans were shaping the battlefield in real time. Each decision, each improvisation was a weapon. The aliens could calculate probabilities, but they could not predict creativity. They could not anticipate courage. Ahuli moved with precision, guiding John and positioning the nodes to maximize disruption. Keep them guessing, he said. Make them doubt their senses. That is our advantage. The largest drone approached, scanning for the source of the disturbances. John activated a reflective device he had built from old mirrors and energy amplifiers. The drone's sensors flickered violently, unable to distinguish real from illusion. Ahuli took the opportunity to strike. Using his martial skill and perfect timing, he disabled a critical external component on the drone. Sparks flew, and the machine wavered in midair. John adjusted the energy pulses, pushing it further into chaos. The other drones faltered, unsure whether to retreat or continue. John felt a surge of exhilaration. This was human ingenuity in action. They were turning the tide not through brute force, but through creativity, intelligence, and courage. As the night deepened, the aliens made one final attempt to regroup. The largest drone activated a signal, calling the others to coordinate, but John and Ahuli anticipated this. They had prepared a countersignal, a chaotic burst of energy that scrambled communication among the machines. One by one, the drones faltered. Some tumbled into the fields, others vanished into the darkness, retreating beyond the horizon. The largest drone struggled to maintain stability, sparks flying from its surface. Ahuli struck with precision, disabling its core systems. With a final shudder, the machine crashed into a distant hill, exploding silently into the night. The farm was still. The wind carried the scent of scorched earth and ozone. John sank to his knees, exhausted but exhilarated. He looked at Ahuli, who stood silently, surveying the field with calm pride. "You did well," Ahuli said quietly, "but it was not just you. It was the mind of a human, coupled with courage and adaptability. That is why we survive, why we endure." John smiled faintly. "I never thought humans could do this, not against something so advanced." Ahuli nodded. "It is not technology alone that makes humans strong. It is imagination, intuition, and the willingness to act when all seems lost. That is our secret. That is our advantage." John looked out across the plains, feeling a deep connection to the land, to Ahuli, and to the ancestors who had once guarded this place. Humanity had proven something extraordinary tonight, not through power but through thought, courage, and creativity. As the first light of dawn broke again, John realized that this battle was not just about survival. It was a lesson, a revelation. Humans could face impossible odds, and through mind and spirit they could prevail. Ahuli turned to him, eyes calm but intense. "The fight is not over. Others may come, but now you know. You are ready, and together we will face what comes." John nodded, feeling a strength he had never known. The farm was no longer a quiet, abandoned place. It was a proving ground for human potential, a symbol of what humans could achieve when they relied not just on machines or weapons, but on their minds, their courage, and their ingenuity. And somewhere far beyond the horizon, the alien forces observed, calculating, learning, but unaware that humans had discovered something they could never predict: the true power of unpredictability. John Mercer smiled faintly, gripping his notebook. He had inherited more than land. He had inherited a legacy, a challenge, and a chance to show the universe that humanity was clever, brave, and unstoppable. The first light of dawn bathed the farm in soft gold and silver. The air was calm, almost serene, a sharp contrast to the chaos of the previous nights. John Mercer stood at the edge of the field, looking out over the plains. The ground still bore marks of their battle, the scorched earth, the broken remnants of alien drones. But it also carried something more. A sense of human victory, earned not through raw power, but through intelligence, courage, and adaptability. Ahuli, the Apache warrior, stood silently beside him. His presence was steady and commanding, yet calm. For centuries, he had waited for someone capable of understanding the hidden power of the farm, and now he had found that in John. "They will return," Ahuli said softly, eyes scanning the horizon. "Or others like them. But humanity has learned a lesson. We are not weak. We do not follow patterns blindly. We survive because we think, because we adapt, because we act when all seems lost." John nodded, the weight of responsibility pressing on him. The events of the past days had transformed him. He had arrived at this farm as an engineer, a city man, far from the natural world. He had inherited land he did not understand. But now he understood more than he had ever thought possible, that humans possessed a unique strength, one that could never be calculated or predicted by machines or aliens alike. "The symbols, the attic," John said, glancing toward the old farmhouse. "They're more than instructions. They're a key, a legacy. They show us how to protect this world, how to fight, how to survive." Ahuli nodded approvingly. "Yes, they are tools, but tools alone are useless without the mind to wield them. That is why I waited for you, John. You have learned to see patterns, to think beyond what is visible, to act when others might hesitate. That is the human advantage." John felt a shiver of pride mixed with humility. The truth was clear. Humans were fragile, yes, but also incredible. They could endure, adapt, and overcome. That knowledge was worth more than any inheritance, more than any farm, more than any technology. He turned back to the fields. The alien threat had retreated for now, but he knew it was only temporary. Others would come. But now he was ready. He had seen what humans were capable of. He had learned from a warrior of centuries past, and together they had turned fear into strategy, danger into opportunity. "This farm, it's more than land now," John said quietly. "It's a symbol. A reminder of what humans can do when we rely on our minds, not just our machines." Ahuli smiled faintly. "It is also a lesson. Our ancestors fought in many ways, and their wisdom lives on. Now we combine it with your knowledge, your ingenuity. The future is ours to protect." The day passed in careful preparation. John worked alongside Ahuli to reinforce the farmhouse, expand the energy nodes, and perfect the illusions and traps that had so effectively confounded the alien drones. They tested each device, adjusted every symbol, and ensured that the farm itself became a living defense system, a place where human creativity turned into a formidable weapon. As evening fell, John took a moment to walk through the fields. He ran his fingers over the grass, feeling the earth beneath him. This land, once silent and ordinary, now held the memory of courage, struggle, and ingenuity. The farm had become a testament to the human spirit. Night came, and with it, the hum of alien engines returned. This time, John was ready. He and Ahuli had devised a plan to lure the forces far beyond the farmhouse, drawing them into the traps and illusions they had set across the fields. The drones approached, sleek and calculated, scanning the farm for weaknesses. But John was calm. He activated the first sequence of energy pulses, sending waves of confusion through the alien sensors. The decoys flickered to life, shadows danced across the fields, and false signals misled the intruders. Ahuli moved with precision, guiding John and positioning the energy nodes to maximize disruption. Sparks flew from drones that misjudged the terrain, and some collided with decoy signals, their systems faltering under the strain. John realized again the truth of Ahuli's teaching. Humans could not be predicted. They could improvise, adapt, and act in ways no machine or alien force could anticipate. That unpredictability was not a weakness, it was a weapon. The largest drone, a metallic beast that had terrorized the farm in the first encounter, hovered above the farmhouse. Its sensors scanned desperately, trying to detect the source of the illusions. John activated the final device, a combination of mirrors, energy amplifiers, and the patterns from the symbols. The drone's sensors flickered violently. It could not distinguish reality from illusion. Ahuli seized the moment. With lightning-fast precision, he disabled a critical system on the drone, sending it into a chaotic spiral. The other drones faltered, unsure whether to follow or retreat. John adjusted the energy pulses, keeping the largest drone in disarray until it tumbled across the fields, crashing into a distant hill in a shower of sparks. The remaining drones, seeing their leader defeated, withdrew into the night sky. The farm was still, bathed in moonlight. John sank to his knees, exhausted but triumphant. Ahuli placed a hand on his shoulder. "You see now, John, this is the power of humanity, not machines, not weapons, but mind, courage, and creativity. That is why we endure, why we survive, and why we will continue to thrive." John looked around, feeling a deep connection to the land, to Ahuli, and to the legacy of humans who had come before. He understood something profound. The farm was no longer just a place. It was a proving ground, a symbol of human potential, and a bridge between past and future. The night grew quiet. The wind whispered across the fields, carrying with it the promise of new challenges and new victories. John knew that other threats might come, but he also knew that humans could face them and win, not because they were the strongest, but because they were clever, brave, and unpredictable. In the days that followed, John stayed on the farm, learning from Ahuli, exploring the symbols, and preparing for the future. He repaired the farmhouse, cleared the fields, and documented everything they had learned. The knowledge of the past, combined with human ingenuity, became a shield that could protect not only the farm but potentially the world. Visitors to the farm would see only a quiet, ordinary place, but John knew the truth. Hidden in the attic, in the symbols, and in the energy nodes across the fields, lay a power that no alien force could calculate, a power born of the human mind and spirit. One evening, as the sun set, John stood on the porch, looking out over the plains. Ahuli sat nearby, sharpening a blade with careful precision. John smiled faintly. "We did it," he said quietly. Ahuli nodded. "Yes, and humanity will continue to do it because humans do not surrender to fear. Humans adapt. Humans think. Humans endure. That is our strength." John Mercer took a deep breath, feeling the wind on his face. The farm was no longer just land. It was a legacy, a proving ground, and a reminder that humanity, with all its flaws and imperfections, was extraordinary. Somewhere beyond the horizon, other forces might be watching, calculating, and planning. But now they had learned the same lesson John and Ahuli had learned. Humans were unpredictable, clever, and courageous, and that made them formidable. The farm stood in silence, peaceful yet vigilant. The plains stretched endlessly, full of promise and potential. And in the attic, the symbols pulsed faintly, a reminder of what humans could achieve when they combined mind, courage, and creativity. John Mercer smiled, feeling hope and determination rise within him. Humanity had won tonight, not by strength alone, but by spirit. And that spirit would endure for as long as humans were willing to think, to adapt, and to act when all seemed lost. The farm was quiet, the wind gentle. But within it lived the heartbeat of something greater, the extraordinary power of humanity. And for John, for Ahuli, and for the world, the fight had only just begun.